welcome. My name is Jake Shane. So today I want to talk a bit about Japanese haiku and how it relates to the art of songwriting. For the better part of a year, I've been reading this book of haiku by a famous 17th century Japanese poet named Basho. The book is called Basho and His Interpreters, Selected Haiku with Commentary, and it's translated by Makoto Ueda, who also writes an introduction. Basho is one of the most famous haiku poets, and he's known for transforming the genre from a sort of entertainment game into a form of fine art. I really love how this book is arranged. You have the haiku in translation, and right below it, you have the transliteration of the Japanese, and since Japanese is phonetic, you can do your best to kind of sound it out and come to understand how it sounds, how the sounds are playing a big role in the meaning of the haiku. And right underneath that transliteration, you have a literal translation of the poem. So the order the words occur in are spelled out. And so you have kind of three ways of looking at this haiku, every haiku. And then below you have a note, perhaps, where it was written or what inspired it. And then right below that you have commentary. So the commentary section is quite funny sometimes. You have a tradition in Japanese haiku where people through the centuries will comment on a poem. And these comments range from ecstatic to derisive, and all with the same haiku. So you'll have two commentators that have the exact opposite opinion on the value of the haiku or what it means. But they sometimes cite what the haiku must have been inspired by or where Basho borrowed from, an image from, or anything like that. So it's really set up quite nicely. So every haiku gets its own page. But you don't just get the haiku out of context. You have all of this context to kind of help me, a Western reader, sort of put this haiku into a perspective or into multiple perspectives. And it gives you a lot more to kind of chew on and mull over. So that's why this book, which is only a couple hundred haiku that you could read in, 20 minutes, has really been filled out, and you can read one or two haiku in a sitting and just kind of sit and think about it for a couple days and then come back to it. Anyway, I've really found this book inspiring for my own writing, both the theory behind the writing and the writing itself. One of the haiku inspired the opening lines to my song St. Clair County. Basho's haiku is, "Don't they quench even the banked charcoal? Those hissing tears." Those hissing tears. That image of tears falling onto hot charcoal and the sound that it evokes really stuck with me, and it inspired these lines of St. Clair County. The opening lines are, "All my tears are dried up in the ashes of the fire. Now the narrow road to freedom looks a little bit wider." All my tears are dried up in the ashes of the fire. Now the narrow road to freedom looks a little bit wider. Of course, this tradition of lifting lines from the literary canon is something very prevalent in art, and I do it quite frequently. Basho did it as well. He borrowed not only from previous Japanese poets, but also from the Chinese tradition. And the beauty of borrowing is in placing old words and thoughts in new contexts, making it new again. Of course, Bob Dylan is the master of this in my field. Sometimes I think he's stolen every line he's ever written. And it wouldn't even matter because he's arranged everything in such a wonderfully novel and potent collage that it sparkles. It's new. If he's taking from a Civil War poet or some pre-war blues music or gospel music or a ballad from England from centuries ago, or he's taking from Ovid or the Greeks. It doesn't matter. He brings it into a contemporary perspective and places his stamp on it, and it shines. The poet W.H. Auden said, "Some writers confuse authenticity, which they ought always to aim at, with originality, which they should never bother about." This idea of originality that some artists, mostly those who are beginning, are obsessed about, is really just a chimera. It's not really possible. You know, we all draw on art that we've experienced from the past, our own experiences. We don't live in a bubble. And so to be completely original is not even something we should aim to be, because it's not possible. Rather, to find our authentic selves and express that is really what's important, and I think what creates great art. There are rules in haiku that you can bend, like the number of syllables and lines. But really, to me, the essence, as I've sort of teased out while reading all of these haiku and all the commentary, is the pointing out of a truth that normally goes unnoticed or unvoiced. And this is absolutely necessary for great songwriting as well. I think all art requires this. And all artists have this ability to kind of pay attention and tease out events from everyday life and sort of elevate them. And in Basho's best haiku, he does this as well. There's one commentary on, let's see, this haiku here is, "Mushroom. From some unknown tree, a leaf sticking on it." And one of the commentators says, "As we trace the evolution of Basho's poetic style, we notice that it gradually moved from a style that sought novelty and dexterity to one that tried to discover a deep meaning in a common object or scene, the so-called Kurumi Style. This poem is one of the best illustrations of the latter style." And I find this is a common thread in the artist's life. Often in his youth, the artist will attempt to perform wild acrobatics, really witty wordplay, all of these pyrotechnics. And then at some point, that kind of falls away. And the artist tends to aim for, in songwriting at least, a lyric that hits the heart directly and doesn't bounce around, doesn't settle for the fireworks. Every artist tends to kind of follow this arc of starting with complexity and caring about impressing immediately upon the listener or the audience, and at some point begins to simplify things. And simplify doesn't mean be simplistic, but rather distill complexities into something understandable, which is extremely difficult to do, and I think is important in songwriting. Of course, there are all different types, but this to me is both the essence of haiku and art in general. To be simple without being simplistic, if that makes any sense to you. And Basho, I believe, at his best, certainly achieved this. Mushroom from some unknown tree, a leaf sticking on it. It's really good. Anyway, in the introduction of this book that Makoto Ueda writes, he says that in these haiku, Basho tried to present life with all its complexities, pointing his finger at its mystery and depth, but avoiding the attempt to force an analytical intellect on it. And I believe the same principle applies to songwriting. To address the mysteries without moralizing, without pretending like you know the answers to the questions that you're asking. Leonard Cohen does a wonderful, wonderful job of this. He asks the difficult questions, but he doesn't pretend like he knows all the answers to them. And most of the time, he doesn't even pretend like he's ever going to find them. It's just these mysteries, this mystery of life that drives him to create. Anyway, we also find out in the introduction that Basho, in his youth, he tried to climb the ladder of high society, didn't quite make it to the ruling class, and then he went through a period of probing the depths of Zen Buddhism, and after a while he just settled on what he called fuga, which is the artist's way of life, a reclusive life devoted to a quest for eternal truth in nature. And that doesn't sound all that bad to me.
St. Clair County.